welcome you to the Nakano Theater tonight, and thank you very much for joining us. Tonight we are pleased to present a 2-hour training for candidates for elective office in the city of Torrance. The city has a lengthy record to working in the area of ethics, both in city government and elections to city offices. Tonight's training is an important part of that continuing commitment to ethics in city government. We are pleased to have Mr. Fred Keeley as our trainer this evening. Excuse me. Mr. Keeley provided democracy consulting and ethics training for the city of Santa Clara in the 2016 election cycle. He has a long history of public service and work in the area of government reform and ethics. Mr. Keeley was co-chair of the Commonwealth Club of California's Voice of Reform project. That project led to the establishment of California Forward, where Mr. Keeley served on the board of directors. California Forward led to the statewide efforts to create the Citizens Independent Redistricting Commission and other constitutional reforms of state government. Mr. Keeley has held local and state office for 24 years, including service as the Speaker Pro Tem of the California Assembly, where he led the investigation into the wrongdoings of former insurance commissioner Chuck Quackenbush. That investigation led directly to the commissioner's resignation from that state constitutional office. It is a pleasure to introduce Mr. Fred Keeley.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank the City of Torrance for all of their kindness and courtesy that have been extended to me during the preparation for this. I also would like to extend an apology to all of you who showed up about a month ago and Southwest Airlines canceled my flight, and I'm very sorry. So on behalf of Southwest Airlines, I apologize to you. But I want to thank the city clerk's office for being so flexible and helpful in rescheduling this and in providing all of the assistance that you see here tonight and a lot of other assistance that, of course, you don't see here this evening, which is the good work of every city clerk. Ladies and gentlemen, what we will do tonight is spend some time on a topic. I was talking to almost every one of you before we began this evening, and this is a topic in contemporary politics in both this country, the state, and in your area that is of pretty substantial interest to folks, I think year in and year out, and that is the ethical component to public service. And it is different than other components, and it's a little bit difficult to, in effect, teach it. I was talking to Mr. Chin, who was talking about how in his world professionally, when he was in this work world, that there's all kinds of training like this. Others who've served on the city council and serve on the city council and the mayor and so on, you know that there are legal requirements for training, AB 1234 and other kinds of training that is mandated. I think one of the areas that makes this a somewhat difficult is the law is relatively easy, meaning if there's a statute on something, your standard is, I must meet the requirements of the law. But ethics training is different. It's about, in essence, a voluntary compliance as to your behavior. And that is more difficult both to teach, and it is more difficult at some level to be able to operationalize. But I think if we spend a little bit of time tonight on it, talk it through somewhat, it may be front of mind then, or not too far back anyway, in terms of how you comport yourself in your campaigns and in public office. So this training is intended to give you and your campaign the tools to run an ethical campaign, but also to win. And I think that there is sometimes a rather prudish view of what ethics means. That somehow, if I'm ethical in my comportment of the rough and tumble of a campaign, gee, I think you're asking me to back away from running a winning campaign. And I think that there's a fair body of evidence that says that's not true, that you in fact get rewarded in certain ways by the electorate and by your colleagues for comporting yourself in an ethical manner. The ethics, I think, we could agree that we can't agree on this. And what I mean by that is, I think we could have started this by saying, everybody write down your definition. And my guess is it's not going to be identical to this. And I think that's another reason that this subject matter is a little bit difficult to get a hold of. But for tonight's purposes, we will use this. Ethics as a set of standard rules and principles guiding yourself in being correct and fair to all people, everybody concerned. And then there's a bit of an example of what that means. And that's probably a pretty good summary. That's probably a pretty good summary. But I think what it does is it needs to be unpacked because there's more to it than that. But that'll be our working definition, is going to be this top sentence. The Josephson Institute has written rather extensively on this topic over the years, and so extensively that they've copyrighted this. But their notion is that if you are thinking about what ethical behavior looks like, or an ethical, how is your character ethical in how you manifest yourself in a campaign or as a public official, that these are a fairly common way to look at unpacking that notion of ethics. That you're trustworthy, respectful, you take personal responsibility, you're fair, caring, and that you take your citizenship responsibilities seriously. Certainly, without exception, if you're running for public office, you're taking your citizenship responsibility seriously. Other areas of this we'll work our way into as we move along. This is a little bit of an expansion on those 6 principles. Let's talk about the first one. Voters expect you to be an open book. What does that mean precisely when we say you're going to be an open book? I think it means this. I think it means that you're not going to withhold material facts about who you are, or what you have done, or what your background is, or what your affiliations and associations have been. That people can see during the course of the campaign that you are presenting, look, I ran successfully for 3 different public offices, held office for 24 years. I understand that campaigns, you are going to put your best foot forward. This is about a broader concept during the course of the campaign. That, of course, when you put out a piece of mail, you're going to say something nice about yourself and how well you did in 4th grade and got a special star for comportment and so on. But there's more to it than that. In every interaction, when you're walking a precinct, knocking on a door, interacting with somebody, when you're in those circumstances that are less public, they're a little more personal. The knock on the door in precinct walking, seeing someone in the grocery store says, hey, I know you're running for council, let me talk to you about such and such. It's, what do you do in those public moments that are really more private? How is your comportment then? What does your behavior look like at that point? Voters expect that you will be this open book. Secondly, these voters expect consistency. This is not a hard concept for us to work through. It is that you really are this person you purport to be. That you're okay with the idea that there is consistency between the public person that you offer to the voters and the private person that you are. Because not every part of what we do every day as a candidate or as an elected official is done in the public sphere or involves the public per se. But that there is a continuity. Who you are is authentic. I think that's another way to look at that. On voters expect you to accept personal responsibility. This is one of those areas, certainly all of you are aware of this, that in this public life we live, especially now, this might not have been true 25 years ago, 50 years ago, but it's true now, that your every behavior, you should imagine that every behavior is publicly recorded, documented, or somehow known. And so this notion that you would take responsibility for your behavior is heightened today, largely due to technology, largely due to communications availability to everyone. We know that each one of us in our smartphones has more computing power, more communication power than any single individual in the world had 20 years ago. You've got that now. And we all have that. So the expectation here is that you will be responsible for that behavior. So that things will be taken out of context. We understand that in campaigns, and we'll get to that in a moment. But this notion that you will be responsible for what you say, how you document that and support that, what you're offering as a candidate for public office or as an elected official once you get there, that you will take the responsibility. It is fair enough to say that there are oftentimes issues arise for which multiple parties have responsibility. Not that you have to carry everything, but that your share of responsibility, that you accept it willingly. Fourth one down here is the voters expect honesty. I think you could argue that there's a degree to which this honesty question can also get a little bit vague. And you're going to say, well, how is that possible? It's not unusual in political life, in public life, for there to be something called a political truth. And a political truth is the truth. It simply isn't the whole truth. You haven't lied, but you've withheld. So what this is about is that you are being honest in a complete way, not in a segmented, compartmental way. This trustworthiness notion, I think this is one that goes to the heart of what you are expecting you can convey to the voters in your campaign. It's one of your true norths in this enterprise of running for office, that you are, and your team and your campaign and everything that comes out is trustworthy, meaning that it is not one of these political truths, that you in fact are not distorting it in order to put a much more favorable light on either your behavior, a past record, something that you're advancing, that it is in fact, they can take that to the bank in essence. You said it, they rely on your word. It is, as we know, all you have in public life. You have your word. Everything after that is something else, but the one thing you've got is you've got your word, and people can count on that. It is, we all know this, that a reputation takes a lifetime to develop and about 1 second to lose, and you don't get it back. So this trustworthiness is an everyday thing. It doesn't end on election day. It's a going forward, continuing how you comport yourself in public life. The voters expect this not only when you're campaigning and working your heart out and raising and spending other people's money to get elected, but that once you get there, that's not the end. That is simply the beginning of a new phase, and all of these core principles, you carry those into your public behavior in your public life as well as an elected official. I don't use a lot of these kinds of phrases, but I think that Tom Peters got this one. He gets a lot of things right, but he absolutely got this one right. There's no such thing as a minor lapse of integrity. A lapse of integrity is a lapse of integrity.
They're all serious. Some are more serious than others, but none are minor. This is not a minor lapse. You made an error. You made a mistake. You made a misstatement. Those are all forgivable. This is about a minor lapse of integrity. This assumes intentionality. This assumes that what you are doing with respect to integrity is you're setting it aside for a moment because there's something else you want to achieve. And you need to set integrity aside in order to achieve that. Doesn't work that way, right? Does not work that way. There's no such thing as a minor lapse of integrity. Now, the city has said there are certain state laws with which you will comply. That's not a choice on your part. That's a requirement. And there are implications for not complying. This you will be required to do on a regular and periodic basis if you are elected. That's by the state of California. That is from the Fair Political Practices Act, as are all of the forms for compliance with the Fair Political Practices Act. Let's take a little trip back in time. Let me get a little interaction going here. Where'd the Fair Political Practices Act come from? Anybody? Okay. Jerry Brown's first state constitutional office he ever held. He was the Secretary of State immediately after the Watergate explosion occurred in Washington, D.C. And everybody and their brother and sister throughout the country was saying, I'm a reformer. I'm going to put an end to this kind of thing. So in seeking office as Secretary of State in the state of California, Jerry Brown ran on a reform policy and then was able to get enacted the Fair Political Practices Act in California. One of several legacies the governor has, and I can tell that this was a long time ago because there weren't a lot of nodding or hands being raised. Yeah, I know where that came from. But that came from a sea-changing moment in our history as a nation. That gave rise to an awful lot of this kind of thing, as well as major changes in both the House of Representatives and the United States Senate, as well as state legislative offices throughout the country. So this is not an issue that you get to sort of, well, we'll see how it goes. I'll do my best. No, this is complying with the law. And we're still not to, well, what's this ethics business about as it relates? This is complying with the law. The city of Torrance has, since roughly just before the beginning of this century, the city has adopted a series of ordinances relating to campaign contributions and late filings and identifications of who's sending mailers and that kind of thing, as well as use of city buildings and equipment, which make all kinds of sense, post-employment restrictions and so on. That's because your city has chosen to do that. There was not some state statute that said every county and every city in California shall adopt the following 7 points, and then we'll give it to the local officials and they figure out how to do that and how to add all the detail to it. No. This came from your city. This is locally grown. You're not alone in this, but you're somewhat different. Of all the cities in California, less than half would have the entire package that you have. Some have a couple of others, some have a little of this, a little of that, but you have a rather comprehensive look at what you want to do in your city. That's obviously the notion that has been alive and well in California for a very long time, and that's the notion of local control. And you will be forgiven if you please do not attack me as a former member of the legislature for forgetting my local government roots when I went to Sacramento. But the local government roots are embedded in this notion here that the city has said, we have a methodical way of looking at campaigns, and we are going to put in law how you do that. Municipal ordinances are the equivalent of a state statute. It's the law. You don't get to decide, gee, that sounds like a good idea. These are guidelines or suggestions. No, these are absolutely the law, and their violations are punished. It can be a misdemeanor or an infraction, but I'm going to guess, it's a wild guess, that not one of you wants even an infraction of the city's campaign laws as something you're going to deal with either during or after your campaign. You're not going to want to do that, of course. So then the city comes along, and they adopted a code of ethics for the city. And I will tell you, the city clerk was kind enough to send me archival, let me get this right. She sent me a series of locations on your city website that I could go to go way back in time, a few years back in time, and look at how you got this. By looking at that city committee that came together and then reported periodically, and there was a lot of backing and forthing and so on. So I watched that, watched all of those videos to get a feel for what you're saying. Obviously, the community thinks this is important, and not just a busy work thing, but a core value issue. And I will tell you, though, that despite the seriousness of the nature of it, and the city clerk's staff know where I'm going with this, I was sitting at my home in Santa Cruz watching these. You may doubt my sanity for sitting there watching these, but I was watching these because I needed to learn about the values and what's the look and feel of the city of Torrance, and I was watching it. And all of a sudden I'm watching this, and at some point some disembodied voice says, "Move them around." And the whole dais started moving. Now, I've never seen such a thing. I thought it was either the craziest or funniest thing I've ever seen in my life. So I immediately called my wife in to say, "You've got to see this. You've got to see this. It's amazing." And I will tell you, I will bust these people publicly. They actually let me sit in the mayor's chair while they moved it today, and I will be eternally grateful for that. Excuse me, sir?
It's an e-ticket.
It is absolutely an e-ticket ride. It's a very, very good thing to do.
It does serve a function. It's so that they
Excuse me?
It does serve a function.
No, it absolutely serves a function. I should have added that because we are on television. It serves a very useful purpose, but you've got to admit, it is one of the coolest things ever.
The first timers.
See it, that's right, like me. That's right. They just fall down. It is good, though. I want to commend you for that. So these are the basic components. And if you went back or thought about, well, what were those 6 pillars that the Josephson Institute was talking about, or what were the definitions, or what does Tom Peters think, or so on, we're going to see that these are merely, not that they're, I use the word merely in that they are equivalent to, these are an expanded version of those individual notions. So this first one about being responsible, I think the key word in here is educate yourself on how to run an ethical campaign. I believe that most people believe when they become a candidate, first, it's a shock to them when they then go through the actual entire campaign. But this notion of educating yourself on how to run an ethical campaign. My guess is when most people sit down to start a campaign for local government race, they'll bring their friends, they'll bring some neighborhood folks, they'll get the people together, you'll sit around, you have a pot of coffee and some cookies, and you're going to imagine your campaign and how it's going to be run. My guess is you jump immediately into, well, who else is running, and what about this, and what about this thing that I said, and should I focus in on this, and so on. My guess is very few campaigns start with, let's educate ourselves on how to run an ethical campaign. I will confess, I ran successfully for the Board of Supervisors twice, elected county treasurer 3 times, state legislature 3 times, all successful runs. Not once did our campaign sit down and start off or even finish by saying, well, gee, how do we run an ethical campaign? But that was then, and this is now. This is now. This is a much higher value issue for voters, this notion of how you comport yourself in a campaign, because there is so much power everybody has in terms of communication. So you can run afoul of this pretty quickly if it isn't, in essence, front of mind at the campaign's outset. This notion about being trustworthy and honest speaks for itself, but I want to draw your attention to this. You're expected to tell the truth, fair enough. You're expected to tell the truth about yourself and your opponents, fair enough. Candidates should focus on issues relevant to Torrance and never try to confuse or mislead the voters. This one, I think, is not the easiest thing in the world to do, because there are some issues that arise in the course of a campaign for local office that are not per se unique to local office. So some of these would be relevant whether you're running for city office or state office or national office. You would be asked these questions. There may be issues in here relevant to Torrance that would be not unique to Torrance or not unique to being running for a local office. Let me give you an example. You may have a belief system, a personal political belief system that says, based on your values, you believe that taxes are confiscatory by their very nature. And therefore, you do not support tax increases. I'm an unapologetic liberal Democrat when I was in the legislature. I did not hold that belief. I had a different belief about taxes. So we can hold principled disagreements about taxes, but what you think about taxes as a notion is going to arise whether you're running for Torrance City Council or you're running for the United States Senate. It's going to be asked of everybody, what is your basic core value about this question? So issues relevant to Torrance don't have to be unique to Torrance. This notion about never trying to confuse or mislead the voters. This, I think, is one of those areas that gets very challenging in the campaign. It is very easy to sit here tonight and talk about it. It gets much more complex as you move, and the pressures become greater as you get into the period that will start in a couple of weeks when vote by mail begins, and certainly as you get yourself closer and closer to the actual election date. And that is, well, I'm not really trying to confuse or mislead the voters, but I've got a limited amount of space in these mailers, and I've got a limited amount of time at the candidates forum, I've got a limited amount of this or that, and I have to get my point across, and I have to make it clear, and I just don't know that I can put every piece of information in it. And gee, I'm sorry if somebody got confused or somebody thought they were misled. Not good enough. Not good enough. There has to be to comply with that notion, there has to be a robust discussion inside your campaign as you make these choices. Make a choice about, when I'm going to make my 3-minute introductory comment at the next candidates forum, what am I going to talk about? And will I talk about it in a rounded way, or am I going to cartoon this one? Am I going to make it less complicated than it really is? What we know is that serving in local government in California is not some easy thing to do. It's a compound, complex enterprise involving millions of dollars, thousands and tens of thousands of people, dozens of departments, all kinds of programs, and everybody's got a somewhat different, even if you're running on a slate, the slate members aren't all lined up together. But what they've got to do is make sure that what you are putting out is not one of these political truths that's not the whole truth. You're just going to hide stuff back over here. Because two things. One is, it's stupid politics. It's stupid politics. Because in today's world, the chances, if you roll the dice, well, we can probably get from here to the election, people won't hear this other part over here. Good luck with that bet. Good luck with it. That bet 25 years ago might not have been bad. That's not a good bet anymore. So this notion about how you present, either in written material or candidates forums or anything of the sort. This respectful notion is an interesting one, I think. Because to some extent, and I've heard this in other presentations I've made, some people have said, well, look, this respect thing, I don't like my opponent. I don't like him. I don't have to like him, and I don't. Okay, fair enough. That's not about that. It's not about whether you like him or not. You can have principled or unprincipled disagreements with each other. That's fine. But how you do this is, I think, the key to this notion. And the building that we are in, named for George Nakano, who I had the great privilege of 4 of our years of service in the California legislature overlapped with each other. And I think George is a really good example of this. And this is, I'll put it, I try to steer away from bumper sticker phrases, but I'm going to give you one now. And that is, I think this notion can be boiled down pretty much to the following bumper sticker. That disagree without being disagreeable. That's the key here. Disagree without being disagreeable. That's essentially the notion of not personalizing it. It's not personalizing. Disagree with each other. That's the healthy part of the body politic. That's the healthy part of what you are trying to do to get into elective office, is because there are value system battles. Some people think this, some people think that. That's a healthy democracy. We don't want it monocultural in the sense of everybody is required in North Korea to think the same thing. That's not what this is. But it is about being respectful in the disagreement process. That will serve you well. I will say this. I know many of you have a lot of years of experience in local government and other public service venues. But this will serve you well, this notion of disagreeing without being disagreeable, because the world of politics is the art of the possible. Where our Venn diagram values and principles, where we can see the overlap and can get somewhere and make progress. That's orders of magnitude made more difficult, if you're disagreeable as well as disagree. People don't want to work with that. George was a great example of how to do that well. George was always, in the time that I worked with him, he had his values and his principles, he had his position on bills and positions on issues, but it was never presented in a disagreeable way. And I think that's you've named this building after him, and my guess is that's not because you think poorly of him, you think well of him. And I think he's a good guide in terms of what this means and how it is operationalized in life. Transparency is a little bit like the honesty and trustworthiness, so I don't want to take your time and repeat things too many times here. Let me talk about what you have available to you. When you came in here, there were a number of handouts, and I think they are uniformly quite good. But if I had to point to one, if I had to say, I would really recommend that you, let me start this over. I would recommend that you do become more than familiar with these. You read them each a couple of times during the course of your campaign. Suggest you read them tonight, not now, hopefully, but read them tonight, read them tomorrow. Don't just let them gather dust. They're good and useful, and they're very helpful. But if somebody said, well, look, that has too much paper, it's too many things, you can only do one thing, what would you do? Stick this in your pocket every time, all the time, carry it with you. I'm serious about this. I mean it honestly. This is not hyperbole. This little fold-out that says running an ethical campaign, and you open it up and it has a number of little boxes on it. We will make sure that you get these before you leave. I can see everybody's hunting for theirs and say, well, I don't know where mine is. It's in your other packet. We will make sure the clerk's office has more of these. Am I correct, Yoni? You have more, quite a few more of these. But this is really helpful. I would suggest you get one and require your campaign staff, volunteers or not, that you get enough of these and you hand these to people on your campaign. Say, stick it in your pocket because I want you to carry it all the time, because that's who we are. That's who our campaign is. We hope the other campaigns are like that, but I'm responsible for my campaign. My campaign, I want everybody carrying one of these in their pocket. Because even if you are not referencing it all the time, you're not, gee, I wonder if this is, do I treat my opponent with dignity and respect? Well, I just said I saw something. It's not that. It's not pulling it out to see what. It's instead, this is part of who you are. This is part of who you are. That's why you're carrying this around. And it isn't a bad idea periodically to take this thing out and look at it. Because campaigns are overwhelming. They are overwhelming. How much time they take, how much everything else in your life is blocked out. You wake up thinking about it. You go to sleep thinking about it. You don't have a meal that you're not thinking about it. You don't have a cup of coffee with anybody. You don't do anything in a campaign. You're always thinking about the campaign. You are immersed in it. And it's not a bad idea to get your bearings by being able periodically. I don't think it's a bad thing to look at. I think it's a quite good thing to look at. So I strongly recommend you carry it around. Again, I'm not a big fan of lots of little quotes, so I've sort of kept them to a minimum as best I could. Abraham Lincoln had a team of rivals, as we know. Doris Kearns Goodwin wrote quite a compelling book on the topic. Character is like a tree and reputation like the shadow. The shadow is what we think of it. The tree is the real thing. I think that's worth contemplating for a moment. Mr. Lincoln said a number of memorable things about ponderous and serious issues in our history. As both a member of Congress and as President of the United States. This one is not frequently quoted, but I think that it is very helpful. It's helpful like the notion of disagreeing without being disagreeable. Character is like a tree and reputation like a shadow. The shadow is what we think of it. The tree is the real thing. And your character is what we're focused on tonight. It's your character. It is how you comport and behave in this public life that you're entering on. And the notion here that your city seems quite committed to is that it isn't limited to the candidate. It is you are the head of a team. It's your name on the ballot. It's the whole team that is helping you get this accomplished. So they are implicated in this code of ethics. And the expectation is that you, as the leader of the team, will insist on that. When you signed the code of ethics, when you filed for office here in the city of Torrance, you were committing the enterprise of running for office to this set of standards and behavior. Not that you can say, that's a pretty good idea, and I am going to comport myself in such a manner. But gee, I got this political consultant, and man, he's done 1,000 of these races, and he says, unless I do this way tonight, and drop this piece of mail tomorrow, and kind of cut it this way rather than that way, and kind of he can show me some crosstabs that say, this is going to move women 25 to 45 over here, and this is going to give me a competitive advantage, and so on. Yeah, I've got to kind of, it's not going to be entirely what I'm happy with, but I am advised that this person's got decades of experience that I don't have, so I'm going to go with that. That's not going to cut it either. We know that's not going to cut it. If you expect to lead the city of Torrance, you damn well better be able to lead your campaign consultant. If you can't lead your team to get elected, what are your chances of leading the city once you get elected? Worth considering. So your campaign team is going to support and defend and insist upon a shared value in the campaign of high ethical standards. Of course, the candidate, but in all other aspects of the campaign. If you've got a phone bank going and you've got a 30-second script for people to read, you're responsible for every word in that 30-second script. So it's a really good idea for that to be comporting with the ethics pledge that you took. This one, I almost left it out. And the reason I did is because, again, I think it slightly confuses the notion of compliance with the law versus your character, which is voluntary on this notion of ethics. This isn't voluntary. But these gray area decisions during the campaign, they are absolutely implicated. Implicated in that is the ethics pledge that you signed. Your campaign staff should be very candid with each other and especially with you about this, the third bullet. If you think that, if somebody on your staff thinks that you are doing something that's not cool, or by the opposition, you need to, this is the part about taking some responsibility for it and not trying to spread it around or say, gee, I had a bad consultant on that or whatever it is. In effect, you need to have your campaign family has the same values that you have, and the values that you have on this question of ethics are represented in what you signed as the ethics pledge and compliance with the city's code of campaign and public service in an ethical way. Some of these are simply good ideas for anybody in public life. This notion of being respectful and polite creates the opportunity for people to be engaged and involved with you. This is a choice. We've all met people in public life who aren't very respectful of the public, who aren't very respectful of their opposition, who aren't very respectful of other team members, and we've seen them, we've heard them, and sometimes they're quite successful. Quite successful. They might get elected to the state senate or Congress or whatever it might be. It's not that every person in public life's a lovable character. It's that you are going to comport yourself in a way that is respectful. Not taken as weakness, not taken as softness, not taken as backing away from having a strong position on an issue, but the way that you present that it is done in a respectful way, because that creates space around you for other people to come in and participate in this process, this democratic process we've got. This notion on the third bullet probably comes from your husband, wife, partner, family, children, people who love you and care for you, which is this overworking part. Your staff, your campaign folks will have many ideas about the 28 hours a day you should work and everything you should be doing, and everything they've got in mind is critically important to whether your campaign's successful or not. And they're right. This, you know this from other aspects of your life, that when you're worn down, when you're emotionally tired, when this or that is bearing down on you and you've worked, and we have quite a work ethic in this country about, self-worth is tied up in our work and so on. That's a cultural issue. But we also know that not taking care of yourself and overworking is where you can make these lapses, where you can make an error, and it will, we know, bite you and not be helpful. So this is, don't read this as, the guy from Santa Cruz was telling us, this touchy-feely thing about, taking care of ourselves. This is smart for you. No matter who you are, this is smart for you, but it's really smart in campaign land, especially if you have not run for office before. because there is no telling anybody about what it really is like. And 1, 2, 3, 4 have run your first time running, right? So 80% of the people here who are running for office have gone through it, but they can't explain it to Mr. Chen sufficiently. Mr. Chen has to experience it for himself. Then he'll know that it is one of these undertakings in life that is, as I mentioned earlier, rather consuming in its nature. Of course, you would want to be gracious in defeat. It is, I've had the good fortune of not losing a race, not because I'm so spectacular, probably because I ran in lucky races or something, but I have friends and colleagues and so on who have held office and then sought another office and lost and so on, and that's terribly hard as an individual because you're so exposed publicly. Your victory is exposed publicly, your losses are exposed publicly, and it's a very big stage. It is a very public moment if you are not successful, especially with all the cultural imperatives towards success and tying our self-worth to what we are doing in our lives. This one, I was absolutely convinced I was going to lose my 1996 primary race for the Assembly. I was absolutely convinced, and I was inconsolable on election day that I was going to lose so badly, but I won, shocking to me. But I know the feelings I had when I thought, geez, I might not win this thing. I've been campaigning for this for a year and a half. This is what I've done. And it all came down to this one day. And I'm feeling helpless. There's nothing more I can do. And I'm probably going to lose. And oh my gosh, and what are people going to think? Those are your feelings. What we know as human beings is you can debate lots of things, but you can't debate somebody else's feelings. They are the one authentic thing we have in life, is our own feelings. And so I'm not saying put on a happy face, and, it's all's well, don't worry about it. But there does need to be, losing well, a graciousness about that. It will serve you well in your future activities, because my guess is, for many of you, this is another step in how you serve your community in Torrance. This is another step in how you do that. And you may want to do it again. If you don't win, you may want to do it again. People will remember not only how you won, they'll remember how you lost, how you comported yourself. So it's, again, not only is it ethical to be that way, it's smart politics. Okay. Can I now take a break, and then when we come back, we will do, Mr. Chen, what you were kidding me about before this started, and that we will do some examples. We will have some examples. All right, so take 10 minutes, and we'll be right back. Thank you very much. Back in action here. We are going to look at 3 or 4 hypotheticals and then change them a little bit each as we talk about them. But right before we do that, I want to go back again, we'll sort of refresh ourselves and start coming into this area of hypotheticals by thinking about these notions. This goes to that question of, again, not necessarily what would you do at a candidates forum, what would you do in a presentation at an endorsement session before the Central Labor Council or whatever it might be. A lot of this is how you conduct much more, which will be much more of your time, as you know, in the campaign, is not spent at candidates forums or endorsement sessions or so on. God knows there's plenty of them, but that's not where you spend the bulk of the time. The bulk of the time that you spend is going to be one-on-ones or 1 on 2 or 3 voters at a time. And that's what this gets to. This gets to, would your actions be the same if all the facts were published on the internet or were in the Daily Breeze? what would are you still okay with that? Are you still okay going there, saying that, authorizing that mail? Are you? Would you do the same thing at a door with somebody you're talking to who you know exactly what answer they want from you? You know, you've been asked this question before. You know it's an important question. You're trying to shade it a little bit. What if your partner was standing at the door with you? Your husband, your wife, your best friend, your child, they're standing at the door with you. Would you say the same thing then? When they know who you are and what you think and they've got a more complete view, would you and this significant person who's with you, you good with that? You know, would that be the same comment you would make? This question about would you want, it's the golden rule issue, simply reworded slightly. And of course you would not jump off the garage roof if all the other kids did it. You probably are a little smarter than that. So let's take a look at this one. So a homeowner's filed plans for a major remodeling that will require a year of construction work. His next door neighbor wants to block the work because of the length of time he and his family will deal with the dirt and noise and all the rest of it. And while it's a complicated project, it meets all city requirements. The neighbor and you're a city council member, a neighbor and you have been close friends from high school. And you still see each other, you're still good buddies. And he asks you to intercede to impose some more strict noise control, dust control, hours of operation on the construction, and so on, that either aren't in the building permit or the discretionary permit that was given to these folks. What do you do? What do you do? What do we do? And we've got a microphone so we can, what do you think you'd do in that situation? Your friend says, hey, look, God, geez, this is really tough. You know, we've got a new baby. We've got, as you know, my wife's an ER nurse. She has to get up sometimes 2 in the morning to go work her shift, and sleeps during the day. We can't really do this. This is just a terrible disruption. And I know that it meets all the city requirements, but can you get in there and just do a little bit more for us in this situation? What's the right thing to do on this? What do you say to him? Here's your choice. You can raise your hand or I'll call on you. Here's your choice. Sir. Yes, sir.
You could
state your name so that the people who are watching will know.
Tom Brewer, candidate for mayor.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. You can explain to your neighbor that, if you did this for everybody, we wouldn't have any rules in the city. That this is, you understand what they're talking about, but this meets the code that we have in our city. This meets the law, and as much as we're friends, I'm not going to help you out this time.
There you go. Anybody see it differently than that? What about an answer like this? Once in a while we might do something like that. I know there was a big commercial construction project over such and such, and it's right across the street from an apartment complex, and they had a lot of complaints, and we went back and looked at the conditions of the permit, and we added a few more. So I don't know, we've never done it on a single family residence, but there might be something I can work with on that. Good, bad, or indifferent answer. Right answer, wrong answer. Sir. Council member. No. Say your name so everybody knows.
Kurt Wiedemann, Torrance City Council.
Thank you, sir.
Actually, we can place stricter controls on separate projects. I think the operative thing here, as far as an ethical scenario, is the fact that this neighbor has been a close friend from high school, so it's kind of a give and take on that basis, not looking at it citywide, i.e., there's always extenuating circumstances, and we can put stricter controls on things. It doesn't always have to just meet the requirements, the building code requirements, the times, the dates, dust control. But I think the operative word here, though, is the neighbor and you have been close friends from high school, because that implies there's a quid pro quo for your friendship.
Others? Anybody else on this? Can we agree with him? Mr. Chen.
George Chen, candidate for City Council. The way I would approach it would be, understand that we've been friends for a long time. However, this is a case where the best thing to do is, go to either the planning commission, someone that's more neutral. We are too close for this, because if you have a legitimate complaint, there's an area in the city that will handle that. And it's best that I remain neutral on this. And maybe something, for the sake of our friendship, I should remain neutral on this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So in your scenario, you give them some guidance to go someplace that is not a completely dead end. It's like, well, look, we don't do this as individual council members, but you can go over here and see where you get. Here's where you want to go, as opposed to, yeah, I'll do you this favor.
Right, like a planning commission or somewhere where it's
Okay, building officials, something like that nature. Okay.
And they're doing construction 10 o'clock at night. That's
Yeah, right. No, fair enough. 10 o'clock at night. Probably not going to do that in the city of Torrance, right? Mr. Mayor?
I think counseling has a lot of the importance in this. Explaining to your friend that you have strict restrictions, you can't change things for other people, but then ask him if he has communicated with his neighbor.
Right.
Bringing people together and resolving and explaining that he has a different situation with the baby, et cetera, and perhaps sometimes they do that. Now, I've had good results on that, and I've had really bad results where the door was slammed in my face.
Yeah.
So,
So
but it's a methodology to do it.
Interesting other way to do it is serve as a problem solver with those folks as best you could. You're not doing him an individual different favor. Councilmember, want to weigh in on this?
Councilmember Tim Goodrich, I think you could always, since we don't have districts yet, possibly hand it off to
Jimmy, pronounce your last name.
hand it off to a neutral third-party council member that doesn't have those connections to handle.
Okay. Mr. Gow, let me see if you want to come in on this one.
Well, as is the nature of these kind of questions, by the time it gets down to the end, everyone's
Don't worry, we'll start with you on the next one. We'll pick on you.
Said
on
everything, but I do agree that, with George that we have great commissions in this city, and there's always some commission that is appropriate for whatever issue a citizen has. And our planning commission is the one that handles all of these issues, and that would be a great way to do that, is to direct them to a place where they can actually get something done. And our mayor probably had the best one, and that is talk to your neighbor first.
And if that's a hard thing to do, let me be the person that brings you together. Let me be the person who helps make that happen for you.
Yep.
I think the key on this one, and I think it was Councilmember Wyden, I believe was it you that drew the attention to the close friends part? Yeah, and I think that's the real heart of this one, obviously, is, in other words, what would you do something different than this for this person than you would do for anybody else similarly situated? Right? If somebody who didn't know at all called you up and said, I know you live 4 blocks away from me, council member, and gee, you don't know me, I don't know you, except I know you're my council member or a council member, and gee, blah, 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 blah. Would you do the same thing for them? You need to do the same thing for them or not that you do for your buddy. That's the issue here. That's that consistency notion. That's where the ethical comportment and behavior is. There's a continuity, consistency to it. Let's take a look at another one. During the election campaign, your campaign manager recommends that you take your nomination form to City Hall, ask employees to sign your nomination papers. She recommends this will save you time. Lots of city employees are also residents. Quick way to get the signatures. What are the legal and ethical considerations? This is a softball underhand for you, but I'm going to complicate it. Mr. Gow, let's give it a start. What do you do on this one?
Well, again, I think Torrance has a way of being out in the front of most of these issues, and we make it very clear that you're not to involve city employees in any of your campaign activities. And I think that's the best way to keep everything on the up and up. And just, they got a job to do, and it doesn't involve your campaign.
Is the issue here that it's city employees, or the issue is you're doing it in City Hall, or it's both of those issues?
Well, as you ran through, and I can't right now hand you one of my donation envelopes and say, hey, Fred, you wouldn't mind, because we're here in the
There we
Nakano
go.
Theater, and so, yeah, city property, you can't do it on city property, and you don't involve city employees.
Okay?
Yeah, so it's
Hand it over to Mayor Fury. Mayor, what if I change this and I say, well, instead, we know that you shouldn't do it at City Hall, but hey, city employees are also, some city employees are residents here, registered voters. They're entitled to sign or not sign anything they want. So I'm not going to go in City Hall and do this, but I'm going to be in the parking lot. And I know a few people, and I'm going to ask them in the parking lot. So it's not really in the workplace per se, and it's really after hours. I know their work days, this particular group of people, their work day ends at 5 o'clock, so I'll just kind of I'll troll around in the parking lot a little bit. We good?
Not really. The whole issue there, and people will learn this if they're elected or when they get elected, is that it's an undue influence on an employee. They see us as the leaders of the community, and if you ask an employee to do something, they may just do it because you're asking them as the mayor or city councilman, another elected official. It's a very difficult thing for some people to comprehend that we only have 2 employees, and our employees are the city manager and the city attorney. And we are not to say, hey, bus driver, look, could you just vary this route around here? Or, Mr. Street Cleaner, I'd like you to do this street twice. Because they will do that, perhaps.
That's right.
Because you said that. But it could also be a harassment situation, because they feel as though you're putting undue pressure on them to do something.
Yeah.
And so the best situation in this is, if you know city employees who live next door to you, your friends and neighbors, it's not a problem at all. But to do it anywhere near City Hall or to people you don't know, just avoid them.
So moving along to Mr. Chen. Mr. Chen, let me take the fact pattern, just moving it a little bit. So you're not at City Hall, but you hear that, I don't know who represents your general bargaining unit. SEIU represent? AFSCME. So you hear that the annual AFSCME picnic is taking place on Sunday. And you know that it's going to be lots of AFSCME employees from many cities, many jurisdictions, but there's going to be a fair number of City of Torrance employees there as well. And this is taking place, this picnic's down on the beach. That little lovely part of the beach that is in the City of Torrance. I just learned that today. I said it like I knew it. I was educated about it today. And it looks lovely, by the way. But you're on the beach. And they're having their annual beach picnic. AFSCME. You okay? Can you circulate it then? Can you go around and ask them then?
Well, I think as far as I know, I think the employees of the city, I would refrain from them. I think it's not so much how much you can skate by the cliff and get around it. I think that there's another aspect in this whole situation that you're painting for us. There's also the perception. I think that's a key here, at least for me.
Yeah.
The perception of what you're trying to do. If I'm a nominee and I'm trying to get up to 30 signatures, if I can't do it outside of those environments you depicted, then I should not be running.
That's right. It's not 5,000 signatures. That's right.
Correct. And that's how I feel about it.
Okay.
And I would explain that to my campaign manager. The perceptions, not just me, the entire team, there's a perception.
Good. Let's move down to Mr. Weideman. Mr. Weideman, so let's change it a little bit. Where you have heard that the Public Works Department has a regular volleyball game that they play Wednesday afternoons or Friday afternoons after work, and it's not a city-sponsored function. It's just a custom and practice. People have been doing this for years. You know a lot of these people. You're not an incumbent. You're a candidate. You're not an incumbent. You're a candidate. And you know a number of these people because you've been around the city and got some buddies and this and that who are there. You do it at that volleyball game?
If we're back to collecting nomination signatures,
Yes,
I don't
yeah.
know about that, because we only need 20 signatures.
Okay.
So I kind of agree with
Yeah.
Mr.
But
Chin on that one.
accept my fact pattern, though, for the fun of it.
Okay, so have I been invited to this volleyball game? No, I haven't. So I go to the volleyball game because I just want to see some friends that I know that work in the Works Department. But I'm soliciting my nomination papers? Nah. Don't buy it.
Yeah. And let's go here. Here we go. So, and Tom, let's use the same fact pattern from the Public Works volleyball game. City employees, but not a city event, not a city property. It's after hours. What harm?
Well, we've heard a lot of variations on the same theme here, that it's not the right thing to do, and that's good. But the other thing that you have to look at is this is kind of an exertion of power on your part. You're going there with the idea that you're actually above them. You're going there with the idea that you're putting them on the spot to sign this for you, whether they like it or not. You know who's going to sign it, so the idea is that, if you don't sign it, and I get in, be careful.
To my memory.
Yeah.
Can't take it out of my memory if you said no.
That's right.
Right? Yeah.
So you're putting them really on the spot, and you're putting the fear into them that it's wrong to do.
There you go.
Shouldn't do that. It's not the right thing to go any place that's a concentration of one group, to put them on the spot to sign something for you.
If they could then subsequently be essentially you have policy control then.
Because, if you get elected.
Bargaining, you're bargaining a contract with the general bargaining unit. You're doing this, you're doing that. These can all become then complications or compromises of an unethical nature, if not a legal issue, which I'm not a lawyer, but I'm.
The other thing, too, is
Yes, sir.
if you do win and you're in office and you start walking around City Hall and you walk into these departments where these employees work and, you look at them and, I remember you.
Ooh.
You didn't sign that thing, so it continues to be a power push, too.
Yeah, it does. Right. Good. Okay. Everybody put a gold star on your lapels. Good work. Good work. Let's go to another one. You're a candidate who currently serves. Now, tell me, is there such a thing as a technology commission? That makes it even better. Good. There we go. So imagine you have a city technology commission, and you're attending the city's Animal Services Commission, which you may not have either, which I'm pleased to hear. So it's completely hypothetical. Imagine you do have such things. And the residents are there to talk about feral cats and their welfare, and it's of concern to the folks on the Animal Services Commission. At the end of the meeting, you've been there for the meeting, and you hand out your campaign business card and your technology commission business cards to the folks who are there. I'm going to start in the middle. Let's start here. Let's start with Mr. Chin, then we'll just go bounce, 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 bounce. So, Mr. Chin, let's start here. Yeah, sir, I am sorry. I'm sorry because you're sitting back there. I didn't mean to overlook you. Do you want to weigh in on the other one first? We want to start with this one. You good with this one? Yes. Thank you, sir. I'm sorry to have overlooked you.
Councilmember Tim Goodrich again. I would say that does not fly because shouldn't be conducting campaign business on city property. Number one.
Okay.
Number two, just shouldn't be using your public position for private gain.
Okay. Okay. So it's a flat out no on that one. Okay. Now let's go to Mr. Chen. Mr. Chen, let me change it slightly. You kind of, I don't want to mislead people necessarily by handing this card out, the Technology Commission card, but I am going to hand out my campaign card, but I'm not doing it. I'll wait till the meeting's over and I'll stand outside the meeting. I'm outside the meeting. I haven't said anything during the meeting. I haven't given anybody my city card, but I'm going to hand out my little city council candidate card. It's got my name on one side and 3 important issues on the other. And I'm handing that. We good?
I think the fact that people know what your position still is in the commission. I go back to perception again. we're drawing too close to the line there. I mean, this is one of those things that kind of like what you go to earlier. I think this ethical point is perception here. I have a problem with that one. I would not go close to that. People already know, they just think that, you know, if I'm going to do something like this, what else would I do? I would not get close to that one.
Okay. So let's go over here, Mr. Weideman. Mr. Weideman, let's assume for sake of this discussion.
Change it up for me, please.
What's that?
Change it up for me a little.
Okay, I'm going to change it up for
Good.
you. Let's imagine that unlike Mr. Chen's very gracious statement about the constituency, that everybody knows who commissioners are on the Technology Commission, but let's assume they don't. Let's assume it's sort of obscure. And it's kind of known on the insiders, but the broad public does not know that there is such a thing or that you're a member of it. And you're not handing that out, but you are handing out this campaign card afterwards.
No, absolutely not on the campaign card to the commissioners, if only because if you are elected, you might be able to reappoint them, and there's the inference there. I don't know that I would have a problem handing out my commission card.
The commission card, go ahead.
And the reason being is I'm on the Technology Commission, you're on the Animal Services Commission. I'd like to talk with you.
There may be something we can do on this issue on feral cats by doing some work together.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't think that's blurry. The campaign is absolutely out of the question.
Really out of the question, okay.
You don't even have to mention that you're running. They very well might know. But I don't have a particular problem with handing out your commission card and said, maybe we can talk about, you know, how the Technology Commission can help the animal feral cat condition.
Yeah, that's not completely crazy thinking. There may be an appropriate role for technology in that, right? So let's go over here, Mayor Fury. Let's stick with exact, no, we're going to come back to you. You're going to be there. We're going here now. We're going back and forth, back and forth. Yeah. Make the gentle lady run around a lot here. There we go. Thank you.
You're running our staff around here.
We're going to keep exactly the same fact pattern. What do you think?
Well, first of all, I want to clear up, we do not have a feral cat problem because the coyotes took care of that. But perhaps that was what they were there speaking about.
And you didn't need a technology committee to tell you? I see.
I was on the committee that actually put together the ethics code sections, and truly it's not against the code to do that, to electioneer at City Hall or someplace else. It's against the law to seek or take campaign contributions in a city function or a city property. Yeah. But it's really bad form. It just smacks of really bad form. And I don't know if it really hits on the ethical edge. It just, it's kind of swarmy. And that's just the way I feel about it. I never did it, and I wouldn't do that. But, you know, once you've been elected, then everybody knows who you are. So it's a big different thing. You don't have to say, hi, I know who you are. Yeah. But as a candidate, I can certainly see that you come there and, you know, there's nothing wrong with giving your business card that says that I'm a candidate for council. Now, if you come in there, you know, wearing with banners or something like that, you know, then we're touching on the edge of it. Okay. It's just a swarmy feeling. That's
so. And Tim, we're going to come right down. Tom, excuse me. I'm sorry, Tom. I'm an old man, can't even see with glasses. Tom, so we'll keep the same fact pattern. What do you think?
You know, I think when you are running your campaign and, you know, if you do what the scenario up there presents, you know, some people might think, well, that's perfectly fine. But, you know, there are people that are going to go, you know, I don't like that. I was going to vote for this guy. He's crossed the line as far as I'm concerned. This is something that I think is important. Ethics are important. So, you know, I think just for the sake of, you know, being transparent and stuff, you shouldn't be doing this at City Hall. You know, being there is enough. If they know you're running for office, just being there is enough to show that you care about these issues, and you know that's probably what you really want people to see anyway. You don't need to campaign at City Hall.
There we go.
Mr. Gao, we're going to come to you. Same fact pattern. We good? What do you think?
Yeah, well, let's see. I think that unless you actually have a good reason to have your commission card out, it's probably not a good idea to have that out either. In that, at least I refrain from using my commission card for anything other than specifically for the Social Services Commission. But the other one I think is kind of an identifier of that you are running. It would be probably that thing that you got to watch out for in terms of making sure that you're not doing it in some sort of a way that shows some sort of undue influence or some sort of expectation of quid pro quo or any sort of thing following that. But I think a lot of times you'd be amazed at how many people actually don't know who you are in the city, regardless of what you do. And wait, you're doing what now? So, but I'm
24
sure
years
that
in
there's a
public
fine
life,
line
I know
there,
what you mean.
But I know I kind of refrain from using my commission card unless it's specifically regarding commission business.
Okay. Now, I'm going to guess that all of you would say, if you had been invited there by the Animal Whatever Commission because you are a technology commissioner and they're looking for some joint problem solving, like the gentleman pointed out, my guess is nobody has a problem then because you've been invited. But if you just show up because, right, here's some folks, and if they're interested, they got to be voters, then we're in this issue where it's, Mayor, right, it's not a legal question, it's the ethical question, right? You may even be, it probably doesn't violate any city ordinance, but it's the wrong thing to do. Yeah, there we go, we're good. That's the last hypothetical. Let me do this. Let me see if you folks have got any questions. We've got about 5 minutes left. 6 minutes left, 5 or 6 minutes left. Let me see if you have any questions that I could help you with, comments you want to make as we close. Everybody good? We're all good? Tim, you got anything? We good? I can tell you were reaching for the microphone. Sir.
We have an ordinance that states that you cannot do any fundraising activities on city property. However, we have a lot of city property that is leased to other entities, many restaurants. What is your take? Would any fundraising activities be prohibited on that property that is leased to others?
Okay. Here's, I will answer it with the following disclaimer. Not a lawyer, not familiar with every one of your ordinances, etc. I will answer your question from an ethics point of view. My belief would be, if that is leased to a private entity and that is their business and it is a public facility in effect, then not a government facility, but it's being used for this private purpose exclusively, that you're okay. But my advice would be, obviously, check with the city attorney, but my understanding of that would be you're good. You're good. Because it's owned, but it's not operated as a city facility. I think that's the distinction here. But again, you'll be smart enough to check with city attorney, I suspect. Ladies and gentlemen, ladies, thank you all very, very much. I want to thank the city clerk's office again. The city clerk's running uncontested for re-election, but she's sort of taken herself out of this role in the months we've been working on this together. I want to thank you, Yoni, in your office, and the other staff that have been so terribly helpful with this. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for participating in this. Good evening and good luck to you. Thank you.